Today, we are going deep on a story from the Second World War that honestly feels like it was ripped straight out of a spy movie. It's about a brutal turning point battle where the difference between life and death didn't come from a bigger gun or a faster plane, but from the way a single letter was pronounced. It's an incredible piece of history, so let's get right into it.
So, I want you to really think about this for a second. How could one little sound, just a puff of air that you shape with your tongue, become the ultimate password? The one thing that decides if you live or die. It sounds totally impossible, right? But that is exactly what happened in the dark, terrifying jungles of one of the Pacific's most infamous battlegrounds.
Let's set the scene. It's August 1942. We're on Guadalcanal, an island that most people had never even heard of. This is the first major American ground offensive against the Empire of Japan, and it is a brutal awakening. This isn't a war fought on open fields. No, this is a fight in a thick, humid, suffocating jungle, where the enemy seems to be everywhere and nowhere at the same time. The air is dripping with moisture and with paranoia. Every snap of a twig, every shadow that moves, could be an enemy soldier about to emerge from the darkness.
Okay, now I want you to put yourself in the boots of a young Marine on sentry duty. It is pitch black. Can't see your hand in front of your face black. And you're facing an enemy who are masters of infiltration. They would creep up wearing captured American uniforms. Some of them had been taught to speak perfect, unaccented English. Documents? Those could be stolen or forged. So when a figure slowly walks out of the jungle and whispers the day's password, what do? Is it a friend, a fellow Marine coming back from patrol, or is it an enemy soldier about to kill you? That was the life-or-death gamble they faced every single night.
The answer, the solution to this terrifying problem, came from a really simple but absolutely brilliant observation. And this isn't a historian's theory years later. This is a primary source. This quote comes from Master Technical Sergeant James W. Herbert, a combat correspondent who was actually there. He wrote, "Plain as gay. We always had passwords including the letter L, because L was thought to be hard for the Japanese to pronounce. They noticed a tiny, subtle pattern, a little chink in the enemy's armor, and they exploited it."
So, the big question is, why? Why the letter L? This wasn't just some lucky fluke. It was a weapon forged from the science of language itself. What is it about this one specific sound that made it such a foolproof filter for telling friend from foe? Well, the answer actually lies deep inside our own brains, in the way we're wired from the time we're babies.
Okay, so here's the linguistics of it, and it's fascinating. If you grew up speaking English, your brain has two completely separate boxes for sound. There's a box for the L sound, think light, and a totally different box for the R sound, think right. To you, they're as different as night and day. But in the Japanese language, there's basically only one box for those types of sounds. It's a single sound called an alveolar tap that, to an English ear, sounds like it's somewhere in between an L and an R. It's not that they physically can't make the sound, it's that their brains literally don't hear a difference between the two.
Think about it this way. When you're a baby, your brain is open to every possible sound in every language on Earth. It's a blank slate. But as you grow up listening to your native language, your brain starts to specialize. It gets really, really good at recognizing the sounds that matter in your language, and it prunes away the ability to easily distinguish the ones that don't. For a native Japanese speaker, the brain solidified that one single L/R category. So trying to pull them apart as an adult, especially in a high-stress situation, it's like trying to describe a color you've never seen before. It's incredibly difficult. And what the Marines had stumbled upon is a concept that is thousands of years old. It actually has a name, a Shibboleth. The term comes straight from the Hebrew Bible, from a story where one army, the Gileadites, stopped enemy soldiers trying to cross a river. To identify them, they made them say the word Shibboleth. Their enemies, the Ephraimites, couldn't make the sh sound and would say Sibboleth instead. And for that tiny difference in pronunciation, they were killed. The Marines on Guadalcanal were, probably without even knowing it, using one of the oldest linguistic weapons in the history of warfare.
This brings us to the most famous, the most legendary, and also the most debated example of this shibboleth in action. The word that has become iconic, whispered in the dark jungles of Guadalcanal, Lollapalooza. It's the perfect password, isn't it? It's a uniquely American slang word, and it's just loaded with the very sound the enemy struggled to make.
And the test was as simple as it was deadly. A sentry hears a noise. He challenges the darkness. Lollapalooza. He doesn't even need to wait for the whole word. He's just listening for the first two syllables. A fellow American would reply, Lala, without a second thought. But an infiltrator, whose brain is hardwired differently, would almost certainly substitute his native sound, Rora. And that was it. That one sound was the trigger. The sentry opens fire. Immediately, no follow-up questions.
Okay, but here's where we have to put on our historian hats. It's a killer story, right? It's cinematic, it's easy to remember. But did it actually happen? Was Lollapalooza really the word they used? Or has this powerful legend maybe grown bigger than the actual, verifiable truth? This is where digging into the history gets really interesting. So let's look at the evidence. When you dig into it, you find that the specific Lollapalooza story seems to come from one single place, a 1942 book by a journalist named Oliver Garling. Now, he was there, and he wrote it at the time, so it's a credible source. But that's kind of it. When you look at the official after-action reports from the Marine Corps, it's not there. When you read the powerful, detailed memoirs from guys who lived through that hell, men like Eugene Sledge or Robert Leckie, they don't mention it either. What we have is a single, uncorroborated source for one of the most famous stories of the campaign.
So what does that mean? Well, this is absolutely crucial. We have to separate the principle from the legend. Thanks to Sergeant Herbert's eyewitness account, we know for a fact that the principle, using L words as passwords, was a real, systematic tactic. That part is verified history. The legend is the specific word Lollapalooza. It might have been used, it's certainly plausible, but we can't prove it. So the takeaway is, the tactic was very real, even if its most famous example has become more of a legend.
And you know, this whole idea wasn't just a one-off thing in the Pacific. It's been used throughout history. Think about D-Day in 1944. The American paratroopers' challenge was flash, and the reply had to be thunder. Why? Because that soft thus sound in thunder is really hard for native German speakers to say correctly. They tend to say sunder or tunder. The same basic idea was adapted again in Vietnam for different languages. And today, it's evolved into high-tech, sophisticated voice analysis that can identify dialects and origins. The L test on Guadalcanal was just one chapter in this long hidden history of using language as a key to unlock identity.
But this story has one more layer, and it's probably the most important one. There was a specific group of soldiers fighting for America in the Pacific who were ethnically Japanese, but it would have said Lollapalooza perfectly every single time. And these were the Nisei, the second-generation Japanese-American soldiers.
The story of the Nisei is incredible. They served as vital translators and intelligence specialists for the U.S., all while their own families were being held in internment camps back in the States. Why could they pass the test? Because they grew up in America. English was their native tongue. Their brains were wired with the exact same L and R sound categories as a Marine from Brooklyn or Texas. And their story proves the most critical lesson of all. This test was never, ever about race. It was about language. It was a test of your upbringing, of the sounds that shaped your brain as a child. It was a map of your experience, not a label based on your ancestry.
And we can't forget the stakes. This wasn't a game. 7,100. That's how many American soldiers, sailors, and airmen were killed during the 6 long months of the Guadalcanal campaign. Every password, every challenge in the dark, every one of these split-second linguistic decisions was made against the backdrop of unimaginable loss and sacrifice.
So when you boil it all down, what's the big takeaway from this? For me, it's that language is so much more than just words we use to talk to each other. It's a living history. It's a map of where we've been. The specific sounds we can make easily, the ones we struggle with, the slang we use, it's all a direct reflection of our childhood, our community, and our life's journey.
So, beyond the military tactics and the linguistics, what does this incredible story from a jungle half a world away really have to teach us right here, right now?
Well, I think there are a few really powerful lessons. First, that some of the most brilliant, life-saving ideas don't come from a lab. They come from people on the ground simply paying attention. Second, the story of the Nisei is undeniable proof that while our language and our ethnic identity are connected, they are not the same thing. Third, it teaches us how to think about history. Love a great story like Lollapalooza, but always be willing to ask for the evidence and separate the hard facts from the powerful legends. And finally, it shows us that sometimes the biggest events in history can turn on the absolute smallest of details, a single sound, a single letter.
And that brings me to a final question for you. The L test was a shibboleth for a very specific time and a very specific place. But these kinds of tests, they never really go away. These subtle markers, the accent someone has, the vocabulary they use, the cultural references they get or don't get, they signal to us whether someone is part of our in-group or an outsider. They exist today in job interviews, in our social circles, online. So the question I want to leave you with is this. What are the hidden shibboleths, the hidden linguistic tests that are shaping your world right now? And more importantly, are they being used to bring people together
or to keep them apart.